I wasn't expecting to make another video before the end of 2024. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to a video again I didn't think I'd be making because I've got a video that's scheduled to go up in a couple of days' time. But of course, with the news that The Batman Part 2 has been delayed until 2027, of course, I wanted to give a bit of a reaction to that and my overall thoughts here. So this video is probably going to be all over the place because, you know, when it comes to this and kind of figuring out and, you know, talking about it, it's never linear for me. It's all over the place. We have here from the Hollywood Reporter, the Batman sequel moves to 2027. I just want to remind you guys that, you know, in 2024, it was delayed to 2025. Then in 2025, it was delayed to 2026. And now it is, you know, 2024, and it's been delayed to 2027. So we've been set back another year. So it's not next year. It's not the year after that. It's the year after that in October. And that will make me go from 30 to 33 years old. I mean, I might have my own freaking Robin that I'm, you know, running around with at that point. Like, what? Oh, God, okay, look, I'm going to try and contain myself because, you know, I keep seeing people say online, oh, watch Boba spin this into something positive. Like, yeah, I always try and approach things with a level-headed commentary, but do you think that I'm not, do you think that I don't want this movie out quicker? Calm myself. Alejandro Gonzalez, Inarritu, and Tom Cruise are flying into the fall 2026 movie season. Their untitled feature will arrive on October 2nd, 2026. Warner Brothers announced Friday. That slides into the date previously occupied by Matt Reeves' The Batman sequel, which is this is interesting. There's a few things to talk about in this video, which is currently untitled. In parentheses here, it was previously called The Batman Part 2. The DC Studios film, and this is important to remember, is expected to go into production in the third quarter of 2025, and is now set for an October 1st, 2027 release date. So again, we're going to go into all different areas of this. I'm going to once again bring up this thing behind the scenes that's going on with Matt Reeves and how that could tie into this, and a bunch of various other things. But first, we need to talk about what James Gunn said over on Threads with this user, Real Anarchy, saying, "Hello, James Gunn. Can you please confirm whether this is true or add some more context if possible?" So he said, sure. Yes, it is true. The only reason for the delay, as it currently stands, is that there isn't a full script, right? Those of you who follow me here probably know that already. Matt is committed to making the best film he possibly can, and no one can accurately guess exactly how long a script will take to write. Once there is a finished script, there is around 2 years for pre-production, shooting, and post-production on big films, which makes sense. We're about to run through that timeline. But also how I still have a bit of an issue with it that doesn't truly add up to me, but we're going to explore those avenues. We've had other users saying, I imagine Rob taking on, you know, Nolan's The Odyssey also had a hand in shifting the date, maybe. Either way, bummed to wait another whole year, but I'm sure it'll be worth it. And Gunn says, not at all. So if you had that theory, that's out the window. The Batman Part 2, even though it's got a release date for 2027, or all the way in October, the Hollywood Reporter is saying that it's still planned to be filming next summer, which does make sense and links to what Matt Reeves has said in, you know, fairly recent interviews, you know, due to the Penguin series, that they plan on filming next year. He never said when next year, but yes, like late summer going into fall is when it should be filming, and that matches up, right? There's no lie here. If everything goes according to plan, and, you know, he's got quite a long time to do that script still, late summer, July-ish, it should be absolutely, hopefully, filming by then. Now, the only thing about the Batman Part 2 filming, let's just say July 2025, is that I don't really understand why it has to be a 2027 October 2027 release date, and why it isn't, you know, what we had before with the Batman and how it got delayed from October to March of 2022. March 2022 makes a lot more sense to me. So let's kind of get this on the table. So next year, The Batman Part 2 will enter pre-production. I've discussed many times before that pre-production for The Batman, the first movie, took place in the summer of 2019, and it was ready to shoot around January of 2020. So, give or take 5 or 6 months for all of that insane pre-production work that goes into it, from concepts, from design, from set production, from everything that you need to do. And sure, you could argue to me, maybe Boba, they could expedite it a little bit because they have some stuff from the first movie that they have on deck, from this department to that department to this department. They already have their actors cast, this, that, and the other. Yeah, I get what you're saying there, but let's just say, since we know it's filming July, the first half of next year, as they get more into the swing of things, pre-production will be leading right up until the point of when they're ready to shoot sometime July 2025. Now, this is when shooting will begin, and it should be shooting for roughly, in my opinion, around 5 or 6 months. So let's just say that. So let's just say they're filming July, perhaps towards the end of July. They'll have August, September, October, November, December, and let's just say they finish somewhere in January of 2026, right? Okay, cool. Now, the first film by that point had around about a year of post-production, so all of that VFX, all the editing, all of the cutting and stuff that they need to do by release date, they had a year, and then boom, March 2022 it was released. Well, the thing is, if you apply the same amount of time to The Batman Part 2, from January 2026, when they'll roughly be done with the shooting, that takes us to January of 2027, when roughly somewhere around January, hell, call it February 2027, the film should be baked and ready to take out the oven. So why is it all the way, the release date, in October of 2027? That's something that I can't really truly figure out. Now, my only guess there is that even though they should arguably, even if we have a similar timeline cloned onto The Batman Part 2, which I do want to add in, you can't exactly clone it, it's a different movie, it may have a different process, maybe even a longer process, with Deadline reporting that The Batman Part 2 is rumored or reportedly a VFX heavy sequel. That's still quite a large gap of time, even if you want to say they're done January, February, March 2027, to still wait until October to release it. So my guess is that they just really like that October release date. There is a corporate kind of marketing reason behind studios choosing their release dates, of course. My most optimistic take here is that the October 2027 release date is truly just a placeholder, as really all dates that are announced like this are. This movie, slated for the October 1st, 2027 release date, is just technically, as of right now, a placeholder. This could have been done to just give some kind of wiggle room, right? Just in case Matt Reeves takes even longer to film the script because of those behind-the-scenes reasons, and they start filming instead of July, maybe August, maybe September, and things drag into a bit of the summer of 2027, with only a few months to spare for the October release date. So then the October release date would make sense. But you could look at it on the flip side, and maybe that is just a placeholder because Matt Reeves might be done around the times I was saying in 2027 early, and they could move it up to a March 2027 release date, similar to that of the March 2022 release date for the first Batman movie. Ultimately, though, I really don't know. That is just all I have to say about the release date there. I do think that with the rough timeline that we have, it should really have a March 2027 release date, but we're ultimately going to have to wait and see. With Deadline saying it's a VFX-heavy sequel, I've seen a lot of people read into that. I don't think it's as deep as what people are making it out to be. It's like, oh, it's VFX-heavy because they're going to put the DCU Clayface in it or something like that. No, I mean, I think a lot of people don't realize how VFX-heavy the first Batman movie actually was. So if they're stepping things up a little bit more, as was reported quite a while ago in the cinematography department and, VFX shots, there's so many, believe it or not, that they add to the point of where, to an untrained eye, or the very purpose of you not noticing it, is deliberate, to make up this microcosm of Matt Reeves' Gotham world. That still takes a long amount of time. If they're stepping it up a notch with whatever the plot of Part 2 is, maybe they do want to have that little bit of extra wiggle room and put it for the October 2027 release date. But I am hoping that if everything goes according to plan, despite whatever's going on behind the scenes that you've heard me tease, and at this point other insiders talk about, that it will hopefully be moved up to earlier in the year. Now, it's important for me to stress here, as James Gunn said, the only reason it's been delayed is because there isn't a full script right now. Now, this brings me to what I was briefly talking about earlier, with the anger that some fans are feeling. Again, you can feel angry because you might really want this. You can feel frustrated. I'm not invalidating that because I share those same feelings with you. But I do feel like a lot of people, and I kind of understand this perspective, they're putting a lot of frustration on it because they think that, oh, this is just Matt Reeves procrastinating. Who the hell needs 5.5 years to write a sequel script, even in mind with the WGA strike and Matt Reeves's long script writing process? I'm a fan, I know about that, but I still think this is too long, a lot of people are saying. I get what you're saying, but this is where the other thing needs to be taken into account. And I know I've said it in previous videos that it's frustrating you hearing me talk about this, other scoopers or insiders talk about this, and not giving the context. But what I've been saying in recent videos, it does seem to be getting around now to other, I don't know what you want to call them, insiders, scoopers, whatever, but we have viewer anon saying here, don't be too hard on Reeves. Things are going on. There are reasons it's taken so long for the Batman Part 2 script to be finished. He's not just procrastinating. Promise. We have big screen leaks here saying couldn't have said it better, but yeah, take it easy on Matt. We had Grace Randolph quote viewer Anon's tweet saying, I heard the same thing too. This, as I said, seems to be getting around at this point. This is exactly what I've been talking about in recent videos, admittedly, very vaguely, but what we as a collective have heard about really does offer a context to this whole long script writing process where it turns your frustration into, sure, you might still be a bit frustrated, but more into a, it is what it is feeling, if that makes sense. It's like, okay, I've heard this reason, which isn't to be really divulged because it is a private matter. And, you know, as a result of that, there's not really, once you hear it, anything to critique about the movie making process or the script writing process. But I understand how the large majority of fans out there don't know that, so they're just thinking, why is it taking so long? This makes no sense. Like, okay, we get that Matt Reeves takes a long time to write. That was the WGA strike. But even with all that said and done, this is ridiculous. It shouldn't take this long. All I can say to you there is I get both sides of it. But the reason why I say anything at all, I've had some people like say, hey, Boba, why do you say it or tease it if you're not going to reveal the truth about it? Isn't that just dangling in front of people? You know, that's kind of unfair. Not really, because I think if I'm asked about this subject broadly, hey, Boba, why is this happening? I'm not just going to say, hey, oh yeah, I don't think this is something to worry about with no reasoning whatsoever. Do you know what I mean? At least with this, I can very vaguely tease and say that there is another explanation going on behind the scenes with Matt Reeves that offers some kind of clarity to the script writing process delay, that as a result of learning that, leaves me with no real criticism for Matt Reeves. It's kind of like, oh, do you know what I mean? And through perhaps me saying that, even though you don't know the specifics of the matter, you can kind of just think, okay, you know, use your imagination. Something clearly isn't great here. And that might kind of offer you some kind of, you know, context where it's like, okay, there must be a good reason. I don't know what it is, but it's obviously not just Matt Reeves sitting there, I don't know, eating some popcorn and not doing any work. Do you know what I mean? I think that's better than nothing. You do get people like this getting really pissed off about it, with this user saying, then effing say it to big screen leaks. Why'd you all ducking around the truth? Say it if you got something to say and don't want people to misrepresent it. Are you all still too busy licking the studio's boots? And as Big Screen Leak says here, I completely agree. Has it ever occurred to you this could be a very sensitive subject that nobody wants to discuss out of respect for those involved? Some things are bigger than making a movie. You always need to put yourself and those important to you first, even if it means a year-long delay. Exactly. And that's all I've got to say about that. I echo what Big Screen Leak says there. I get that it's frustrating not knowing the reason that's going around. And I do think that the reason we've heard about is true, because it really does seem to be getting around. And no, it's got nothing to do with the fact that he's rewriting the Batman Part 2 to incorporate into the DCU, it's not that, I can promise you. That's not a private matter, is it? It's not that, as I've seen some people theorize about, and this is my answer with this, I've seen a lot of people say, is it because he's writing Part 2 and Part 3 back-to-back so we can film Part 2 and Part 3? No, I can tell you for a fact that it's not that. Now, is that happening as another separate thing? That would be awesome, but I don't think that's the case. I think Matt Reeves actually is and has only been working on Part 2. So yeah, it's a private thing. Nothing to do with any of those tinfoil hat theories about Matt Reeves just, you know, reincorporating everything to fit into the merge with the DCU. Now, we're still, like, despite the length of this video, we'll be talking about the potential merge with the DCU. Bear with me. But there's a couple of other things I wanted to go over. So the report about the title change. This was intriguing to me because I thought first, oh no, that's just them, you know, it hasn't officially got swinging yet, so technically it has no official title. But I reread the report, and the Hollywood Reporter literally says, which is currently untitled, it was previously called The Batman Part 2. So they are literally reporting, and sure, major trades don't get everything right all the time, but they're saying that we've got some intel that it was called The Batman Part 2 previously, and now it's currently untitled. My only fear with regards to that, or, you know, should I say apprehension, is, and I'm not against subtitles, by the way, so you got The Batman, and then The Batman Part 2, The Shadow of Gotham, or, you know, insert your own amazing title here. Like, don't judge me for that title. I like the idea of titles like that, but my only apprehension is, you know, could there be an argument that I've seen some people say, and I've entertained this months and months and months ago on the channel when things were looking a bit apprehensive back then as well. Hey, could things end with Part 2? Sure, there was a plan for the whole trilogy, but could Matt Reeves be kind of wrapping it up with Part 2, and so they can just go full dive into having one Batman under the DC Studios banner, despite Gunn's comments about being committed to telling Elseworld stories alongside the DCU, so that would mean two Batmen on screen. Could there still be the theory of they want to go gung-ho on one Batman under the DC Studios DCU banner with the DCU Batman, and since that's a while away in the future, because we're going to talk about what Andy Muschietti recently said, they want to kind of wrap things up with Part 2, so they might not want to call it The Batman Part 2 anymore, but rather The Batman and The Batman Shadow of Gotham, or The Trial of the Batman, or God knows what else. Do you know what I mean? The only issue I have with my own logic there, so to criticize myself, is I don't know why I'm apprehensive about that, because having The Batman, the first movie, and then The Batman Part 2, that can still end with Part 2 with it being called The Batman Part 2. Calling it Part 2 doesn't insinuate or necessitate a Part 3, and that was never the case anyway. The Batman Part 2 still needed to do pretty damn well in the worldwide box office to guarantee a Part 3, and I've always said Part 3 is never guaranteed, even though Matt Reeves' long-term story arc was always to tell a psychological development with Robert Pattinson's Bruce Wayne over 3 movies. But I've always said as well that I'm sure the Batman Part 2 will be told in such a way where, like the first film, if we never got a sequel to that, it still kind of works as its own standalone thing, as much as you could continue the journey along in another movie. I think the Batman Part 2 will also still work as a continuance of the first movie, but also as its own story, you know, with its own little thing going on, that doesn't need a Part 3, but sure, the story can be continued along. So as for why it really is untitled, despite me telling you my full thoughts and my apprehensions, I also contradict myself, because whether you call it a different subtitle and not Part 2, or whether you call it Part 2, that still doesn't mean you have to do a Part 3. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know. I don't know what the truth is, or the reasoning, rather, is behind what the Hollywood Reporter has seemingly learned about why it was previously called Part 2 and now is currently untitled. I know some people will say that they're not calling it Part 2 because this Part 2 is going to be the DCU Batman canon now with Pattinson, so they don't want to call it Part 2. They're going to call it something subtitled The Batman We're Now in the DCU. I don't know, but I'm not going to entertain that. I don't think the currently untitled claim has anything to do with the potential merge thing that people are reading into. But to talk about the merge thing for just a second here, there is something that did raise a potential red flag for me. And I say that very, cautiously, because I don't want to fuel the fire of that speculation, because you all know where I stand. I think it should remain separate. I've said before, if the Batman, Pattinson's Batman, is merged into the DCU, it's not something I would hate. Like, I would make, you know, how to say it, like, peace with it, if you will. Like, it's not like I'll throw all my toys out the pram or off the shelf there and be like, you know, it is what it is situation if somehow that did happen. But I've still got my sword firmly planted on the hill of, I think it's still going to be separate, and that whatever Matt Reeves and James Gunn has said in the past should be honored and maintained. I mean, they've literally said it multiple times. But again, as people say, things can change. I don't have a crystal ball, and crazy things have happened. But the red flag, and this isn't a major red flag, arguably, but it's the fact that James Gunn on social media should, in my opinion, and I know, like, I hate myself really for saying this, should have probably said and replied to one of the many people asking what I also asked him, that, hey, can you just, like, hammer the nail in the coffin that with all of this news and speculation coming out recently, and on top of this, delayed to 2027, James, I know you've said it more than once, more than twice, more than thrice, many times before, that Matt Reeves' Batman is not in your DCU. You've said that it's a new actor. You've said that you respect Matt Reeves' vision to want it to be separate. All of this stuff. You've said it so many times. I've got the receipts. But can you, just to appease and finally hammer the nail in the coffin, especially with this recent delay to 2027, can you say that, yes, despite this delay, I am telling you, we have a new actor for the DCU Batman, and Robert Pattinson will not be the DCU Batman. He won't be merged. In my opinion, and yes, I know James Gunn has his own life, it's the holiday period, but he has been interacting with fans on social media ever since this delay news dropped. And I, in my bones, feel like he would have seen people say, hey, can you just debunk? Again, I know it's annoying, James, but can you just say it one time to just shut everyone up for once? Like, for once, especially the past few weeks where people have been fueling the fire even more of the speculation, and now the war, you know, for resisting against the idea of, you know, Robert Pattinson's Batman being merged into the DCU has been made harder than ever with this 2027 delay. Can you just make that so much easier by denying it? He hasn't. And I feel like he would have seen it. And he could have just simply said, yeah, I know I keep saying it, but do you not agree with me? To, like, really just snuff that out and just reassure fans one way or the other that, like, yeah, we get it. It's been delayed. I'm sorry, guys. You know, Matt Reeves is writing the script. And don't worry, you know, whether you want it or not, I can tell you that they are still remaining separate. I've said this many times before, as James Gunn would have probably said in a post, but just to say it again, they are separate. He hasn't said that. I say red flag, it's more of an amber flag to me, because I just truly believe that he would have seen that, and why wouldn't he come out, even with just the foresight of knowing that this delay news would have sparked and fueled the fire of the DCU merge with Pattinson's Batman even more. Would he not be like, yeah, maybe I should say something about that? I know I've said it 1,000 times before, but I'm going to say it again. Like, again. One more time. To really put this into people's brains that they're not merging. But he didn't. Now, I do want to say, by the time I upload this video, maybe he has. Maybe he hasn't, though. And if he says nothing about it, then I don't know what to think about that. Do you know what I mean? You know, maybe he could say it in the next 3 months, because Gunn sometimes, again, it's the kind of thing you hear from him every quarter. Like another update saying, nope, they are separate. Maybe he is busy. Maybe he saw just a couple of posts that he replied to, like the one I pointed out earlier that you're seeing on screen now. He decided to reply to that. Maybe he feels like he's debunked it more than enough times. So what has been said, and it still stands. And he doesn't feel the need to debunk it once again. But if I was James Gunn, and we know he is very communicative with his fans on social media and pretty transparent, if I was that guy who is pretty transparent, I would be like, yeah, just to say it for the 11th time, guys, then they're separate. And then that would squash a lot of the conversation that's taking place right now. Again, I hate talking about this because I worry that people would think that I'm believing it. That's not the case. I'm just trying to cover every basis here, and the fact that James Gunn hasn't spoken about it will cause more fuel to the fire, which again, I want to hold my hands up and say I can't disprove. I literally cannot disprove that. Other than, again, as I said, the letter of the law, on paper, the fact that James Gunn, Matt Reeves, and whatnot have said, literally, there's evidence of them saying that they're not connected. But again, I am aware that things can change, even if I believe personally, like I said in my previous video, that they should adhere to Matt Reeves' vision and his desires of keeping them separate. And so until that day happens and until that article drops, I would just maintain what's been written on paper, even if many of you comment back to me and say, oh, Boba, isn't it so obvious, this, that, and the other. I will say, up until that point, not really, believe it or not. But I do agree that with stuff like this, it does lead to a bit of trepidation with regards to, oh yeah, that does seem like maybe they should squash it again or something like that. And then, you know, John Campea teasing that there might be a incoming Matt Reeves announcement at some point in the future, maybe into the new year. Alongside what we've been talking about, we're expecting, as per the DC Studios fan first tease, that we've got plenty of announcements for projects to come and things like that, that Matt Reeves could be announced to have a larger control over what's going on at DC Studios. But from where I'm standing, that doesn't necessarily mean what people are thinking it does. It could just mean that Matt Reeves has got his fingers dipped into all kinds of Batman pies. Do you know what I mean? Just like how Matt Reeves was going to produce the DCU Arkham series, James Gunn said that himself, alongside his own universes, the Batman. And back then, James Gunn made that distinction that they're separate. But hey, we're doing an Arkham series in the DCU, and he's going to help produce that. And as I've always said, Matt Reeves has got this little Batman guru badge pinned on him over at DC Studios. So he's got, like, with his 6th and Idaho business, while he's a director and a writer, he's got this, you know, larger interest at the same time of, like, governing and helping produce Batman stories. Same thing with Cape Crusader on Amazon Prime. He helped produce that. Then there's the Dynamic Duo movie, the animated puppetry thing going on. He's helping produce that. He's helping produce the Clayface DCU movie written by Mike Flanagan. That doesn't mean that Matt Reeves' Batman's going to be in the DCU necessarily. It just means, like, hey, he helped produce Cape Crusader and that story with Batman, so he's going to help produce and be largely involved with Batman things going on in the DCU. Maybe even DCU Batman itself, which I would really be a big fan of. Let's just say Robert Pattinson's Batman does still remain separate. We also have Matt Reeves' ideas and help with producing DCU Batman with all the fantastical ways he can come to fruition, which would be awesome. But with all of this, you know, stuff happening at the same time, the delay to 2027, the ambiguous, or something with Matt Reeves will be announced next year, and this, that, and the other, it does, again, all make it look like the two are merging to a lot of people out there. But for me, as I keep going on about, until that day happens, I completely agree with people seeing David Corenswet's badass Superman standing there with the badass Robert Pattinson Batman. I get that. I really do. But then, you know, even as, you know, I watched 3C Films, Chris's video recently, and I agree with what he says, but then imagining Robert Pattinson's less fantastical, as Matt Reeves has said, unwinding the fantastical, grounded world of his Batman, which is still very comic booky at the same time, talking with Shazam and Martian Manhunter around a table with the Justice League, that's where it starts to be like, oh yeah, like, oh yeah. I know a lot of you will be like, well, no, but I disagree. But like, for me, that's where it's like, yeah, I don't know about that. And then on top of that, you know, him only being trained by Alfred, you know, retconning his whole history to the point of where, you know, it kind of does look like the only girl he's kissed is Selina Kyle. But no, now apparently he did hook up with Talia at some point in the past, despite him only being in Batman Year 2. And he's got a son, Damian Wayne, coming along. And then all of these things, I don't know. I know people will ultimately still say, well, but Boba, they could kind of make it work still, somehow. But, like, agree to disagree for now on that one. If that ever does happen, I guess I will just have to do a whole separate video and try my best to be like, okay, so this is the way I think they would have to do it to make all of that fit together. Now, lastly here, and I know this took a while to get to this point, but we had Andy Muschietti go on a podcast and talk about the Brave and the Bold. Now, this information dropped on the same day, which is adding even more fuel to the fire, and he stated that the Batman film won't be happening for a while. I believe it's been loosely translated. It could be delayed or postponed, so he might, you know, make a smaller film in between then before making The Brave and the Bold. Now, lots of people are saying that the fact that both of these sets of news have dropped on the same day, the Batman 2 in 2027, and The Brave and the Bold appearing to be on the back burner, and Muschietti directing a film film in between then are connected? I really don't think so, just with respect to this podcast would have been filmed a little while ago, perhaps a few days before the Batman 2 delay announcement, maybe even a week before. So it just so happens that the clip came out at the same time. But you could still read into the fact that the Batman 2 being delayed till 2027 and the Brave and the Bold being on the back burner in the DCU for a while could still be connected. Like, despite the clips releasing on the same day, not really having anything to do with each other in terms of scheduling those two pieces of news, I can see why people are still saying, but that doesn't mean that these two pieces of news aren't still linked. And of course, that could be because of the speculation of Pattinson's Batman merging with the DCU, so the Brave and the Bold is on the back burner because they're doing something there. There's option 2 with regards to how, despite James Gunn, being committed, as he says himself, to telling both Elseworlds Batman stories or any Elseworlds story with any DC character and DCU stories happening simultaneously in the theaters, that they might just want to go gung-ho on the Batman 2, and with the delay, they're kind of putting the DCU Batman on the back burner to kind of boss out the Batman 2, and then go on to develop the DCU Batman a little bit more, and then that leads into more speculation about how things could maybe even wrap up with the Batman Part 2 not getting a Batman Part 3. But I still don't know about that whole option 2 speculation there, because what people need to remember is that, the Brave and the Bold's development behind the scenes, whether they did secretly get a writer and they're trying to figure that out, is separate to the development going on over here with Matt Tomlin and Matt Reeves. It's like saying, oh yeah, they're not going to get along with Lanterns or Supergirl because they're working on Superman. That's not the case, because, within DC Studios, you have different people working on different projects simultaneously. Do you know what I mean? So I keep seeing a lot of people being like, oh, at this point, you may as well cancel the Batman Part 2 and go gung-ho into development on Brave and the Bold. And I'm like, but why do you think that in the first place? Like, they're both separate projects with different teams in different phases of development. Of course, though, having said all of that, you could still inject that there might be some kind of, behind-the-scenes thing going on with the theory of how, just in case you believe the whole, hey, they might want to put the Batman Part 2 out and have that Batman story wrapped up before they go all gung-ho into the DCU Batman so they can label him as the one and only Batman under the DC Studios brand. I guess you could argue that. But again, on paper right now, Gunn is committed to telling both Elseworld stories and DCU stories, even with the same characters. That goes for Superman as well. I'm not saying that J.J. Abrams' Black Superman movie is going to happen, but you see what I mean. He was even talking about, hey, we could do a Red Sun story and stuff like that. That's the fun of DC, how we have this iteration of the character David Cornsweet's version in the DCU, but we might do another cool version over here if the script is right and it meets the high bar of quality we have for passing and greenlighting Elseworlds movies. Another thing I do need to bring up as well is that even though the Brave and the Bold has been put on a bit of a back burner according to Andy Muschietti, or it's been postponed, or whatever the translation accurately is there, and that's why he's making a smaller film before then, the Brave and the Bold isn't like delayed, so to speak, in the sense that it's never been greenlit in the first place. They haven't even got a script, and as per James Gunn, they don't greenlight something into pre-production until they have a script that is perfect for them under their high standards, right? So the whole narrative about the Brave and the Bold being like super delayed and this, that, and the other isn't really an accurate term to put out when it was still in active development and never truly greenlit in the first place. Now, that's not me saying they don't want to do a DC Batman movie or anything like that. No, it just means that they're not going to put that green stamp, the green traffic light beam out there for actual pre-production and stuff like that until the script is done. So can you really call it delayed if it hasn't even been slated for a release in the first place? I have no doubt that they're working on it behind the scenes. Maybe they have had some kind of script in progress, but they haven't got it perfect, so they want to get it right. They want to make their own DCU Batman, which is a very important thing, to be something incredibly successful, and they want to nail it in every facet that they possibly can. And until then, even if you disagree with the fact that they're putting some of their larger characters like Batman and Wonder Woman on the back burner with all of these projects up right in front of it, like Superman, Lanterns, Supergirl, this, that, and the other, like Clayface and whatnot, and other projects, that's still quite a lot of projects in the next few years that they have to theatrically release before they even actually release a Batman movie anyway. So with the whole commentary about it being on the back burner and, you know, Andy Muschietti may have enough time to shoot another film before then, that could just make sense with the lineup we've already got anyway. But I guess the slight red flag or amber flag there is that after the whole It thing that he did, the It series, Welcome to Derry, they should really be moving on quite into active development with The Brave and the Bold. So the fact that he might be shooting another film before then truly does mean it's on the back burner in terms of development, because, you know, if you're shooting another movie, you're not going to be doing all the things in active development that you need to do, truly, in order to get that green light into pre-production. And the question is, why is that? Well, again, I guess that, you know, is down to perspective. You may think it's because really what's happening here, as some people are saying, is that Andy Muschietti isn't really gonna direct The Brave and the Bold, and this is PR speak for him not really being the director. And then you combine that theory with option number 2 theory, with how Pattinson's Batman's gonna be the DCU Batman anyway, so that's why The Brave and the Bold is on the back burner, because they've already got their Batman that they're figuring out. I don't really subscribe to that, as you know. And then option 3, I guess, could just be that, again, they want to, you know, cook all of these other DCU projects, that they've got quite a lot to release, again, theatrically and both on HBO and Max and things like that. They've got a successful Batman, Matt Reeves Batman, cooking in the background, and even though that's in 2027, perhaps they want to put the focus on that for the time being, especially as they're very busy with all of these other DCU projects in the lineup for the next 2 to 3 years anyway. But in all honesty, guys, I don't really know the answer to this one, because on paper, according to what James Gunn has said and everything like that, they should really, as per what we've learned, be developing The Brave and the Bold alongside Matt Reeves's Robert Pattinson Batman. Like, why put it on the back burner if you're going to have both Batmen simultaneously having their own movies and own appearances in their own respective universes? That does, once again, appear to people to be fairly fishy. But guys, that is absolutely everything from me in today's video. You know, I'm going to be mega honest with you. Other than everything I've kind of already said, I'm kind of left with a feeling of, you know, I can't pretend to know exactly what's going on. I know I voiced how I hope 2027 is more just a placeholder, and I explained the rough timeline of production, which, you know, is a pretty fair assessment of a timeline. So I'm hoping that things will move up, but maybe they want to leave wiggle room for a more ambitious sequel movie. Why didn't James Gunn come out and just say that the DCU Batman and Robert Pattinson's Batman are indeed separate? I know he said that before, so you could just say that to me, but he could have just slammed it down again, anticipating and knowing that people would raise that question up again like they never have before because of the delay to 2027. Is that something to read into? Now we've got The Brave and the Bold being put on the back burner. Could that be down to something fishy going on, suspicious behind the scenes? Or is it that, you know, for some of the reasons I said, plus the other DCU projects that they've got lined up, they might be fairly happy taking their time to get to Batman, like they might be with Wonder Woman? Or there could be another project that they're cooking up in the background that James Gunn is, you know, looking forward to announce as we go into the new year, and as we're anticipating these new DCU announcements, whether that's linked to Matt Reeves and other projects. Maybe there will be a DCU Batman movie before The Brave and the Bold, like a world's finest thing. Or maybe, to chuck another idea out there, even though Mike Flanagan's Clayface is quite a separate tragic origin story of Clayface, they could change their minds and be like, hey, since we're not doing Brave and the Bold for a little while with all of these other projects coming out and giving more spotlight to Matt Reeves' Batman Part 2, let's backdoor pilot a Batman appearance, even if minimal, in the Clayface movie. I don't know. Like, there's so much to ponder here, but again, I'm not going to be that guy and put on this hat and be like, yeah, I know what's going on. I don't. I have my own personal beliefs. I do admit that at this point, things are wavering a little bit in terms of my conviction. I think it would be silly to not, you know, entertain how, you know, anything can happen in this world. But until, again, as I said, I see an article, I'm still going to remain with my thoughts about how things should be separate. there is that reason behind the scenes with Matt Reeves as to why the script has been taking this long, and it's a very, 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 very legitimate one. And if all stands to reason there, as per what's been stated before, that doesn't impact the fact that that universe is separate, if that makes sense. But again, I have no crystal ball, and another thing separate to the Matt Reeves private thing could be going on with regards to conversations of those two worlds merging. I don't know, guys, but I've blabbered for long enough. That was always my intention, to kind of do a almost live stream-esque, podcasty-esque video of me just waffling and yapping on. So I encourage you to yap down in the comments below about this. I know there's going to be a wild range of theories here, all kinds of different circumstantial and supporting evidence going to each camp as to why it is merging, why it isn't merging, or whatever's going on. But let me know your thoughts. I'll keep you up to date as we learn more concrete stuff. I do apologize if James Gunn has said something else that, let's just say he did say that they are separate once again by the time you see this video. I've still uploaded it anyway because I wanted to get my thoughts out on this. But until next time, you'll see me in another video before the new year. It's a DCU discussion series video, but then things will be back to normal. Unless something crazy happens again, you might see me, but hopefully not. I hope that I can get another few days off until then. But anyway, guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see all of you Bat family in the next video. Goodbye.